welcome. Great to have everybody here. Thank you for joining us. We are going to walk through some updates around the project, where we are with Piers Park III, and save time at the end for questions. If you would like, you can open up the chat box and say hello there. But just to get started here, this is the first of 4 meetings that we're hosting this week and next to share an update on the Piers Park III design and hear your feedback. We're offering a Spanish translation tonight as part of this meeting. So if you would like to listen to it in Spanish, you can select the Spanish translation option at the bottom of your screen. Just click on the little globe. If you prefer English, it's actually probably better to choose the English version, just to keep that straight. We are, however, also offering an additional meeting this evening conducted fully in Spanish. So if you'd prefer to participate in the Spanish language meeting, that'll be following at 7:15 this evening. The interpretation tonight is brought to you by TD Bank and the TD Ready Commitment. Please select your preferred language by clicking on the globe symbol at the bottom of the screen. Our goals for tonight are to briefly remind everyone about the project, where we've been so far, provide an update on all of the outreach and programming that our team has worked on since our last public design review, and then get a design update with help from Chris Donahue of MVVNA. And we'll have time for feedback and questions at the end. Please feel free, if you'd like, to put questions and comments in the chat as we go. Amy iNation from our team is going to be helping out responding to those at the end. But for those larger questions, we'll also have time at the end if folks want to raise their hand and ask them. We would love that as well. And so, yeah, we will get to that soon. The rest of the team joining me tonight, Gabriela Ramirez, who you'll hear from, is our outreach coordinator. Christine Boynton is our coastal, actually, no, she's now our content director at the Trustees. She got a promotion, but she's still here with us tonight, which we appreciate. And then, as I mentioned, Chris Donahue from MVVNA. Also just want to say a quick hello and a shout out to our friends and colleagues from Massport. Andrew Hargens is on, looks like, and Megan Casey has joined us as well. We really appreciate the participation and partnership and patience of Massport as we work through this really complex project. And we certainly wouldn't be here tonight without their support as well. Are there any other representatives from either the city or state officials? I know some of our elected officials had expressed interest in coming this evening. I did speak with Representative Madra this afternoon. He wanted to come, but tonight is his birthday, so he wasn't able to join us. But best wishes to the representative this evening. So if there are any other staff that we would like to say hello to, feel free to hit the raise hand button if you want to say hello. Otherwise, you can just drop us a line in the chat. All right, we will keep this moving then. As we get started here, it'd be great if folks wanted to share in the chat where they're joining us from. Give a shout out to either your neighborhood, if you're from Eastie, what part of Eastie you're from, if you're from other parts of Boston, say that as well. If you're coming from outside of Boston, welcome. We're glad to have you here. So if you want to just let us know where you're at, we would appreciate it. AJ from Jeffries Point has joined us. Great to see you, AJ. Mary, as always, from Jeffries Point, great to see you. Thank you for coming. We're excited to talk to you about the plans. So yeah, if you can, keep those coming. More from, or JP is from Cottage Street. Great to see you, JP. Thank you for being here. Any others I should shout out before we go? Aaron from Portside, right next to the fence. So you'll have a lot of thoughts about this, I'm sure. Thanks for coming, Aaron. Well, so as a refresher for anyone who's joining us for the first time tonight, I want to begin just by restating the trustees' vision for the Boston waterfront. The Piers Park III project is part of an overall vision that imagines a network of connected green space that's publicly accessible around Boston's waterfront. We spent several years identifying places where we can create such a series of parks that meet the following criteria that you see here. World-class destination in its design and programming that supports the community's needs and is accessible to all. That brings value to Boston's climate resiliency goals, and it's something that we can build and maintain through philanthropic support. In 2020, the trustees were designated by Massport as the nonprofit partner to design, construct, and manage Piers Park III, which you see here adjacent to Piers Park II. Big congratulations to Massport for breaking ground on phase 2 just a couple weeks ago. Very exciting moment in the overall progress of the Piers Park complex, and we're excited to see that as well. Since designation in 2020, we've increased community outreach and engagement to gather feedback on the Piers Park III design and future programming opportunities in the park. This past year, we've spent much of our time focused on connecting with the community in East Boston and across the city. Our goal has always been to enhance the design and programming of Piers Park by offering fun, free activities that attract diverse audiences and provide a platform for new experiences. All of these programs and engagement experiences were provided free to the public by the trustees and made possible by generous support from our partners at TD Bank, as well as the Barr Foundation and Converse. To share more about this year's outreach programs, I'm now going to pass it over to our Community Outreach Coordinator and East Boston's own Gabriela Ramirez.
Thank you, Nick. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see you all here tonight. So a lot of you probably saw our waterfront ambassadors around this summer. Much of our engagement and programming was led by our 4th cohort of waterfront ambassadors. As you can see here, we had 10 local teams from East Boston, Chelsea, Rosendale, and South Boston. They were employed in our 7-week program where they conducted community outreach about Piers Park III, helped with programs like our family festivals, taught a morning lesson to the Piers Park Sailing Center youth, and they helped out Eastie Farm and did so much more this summer. And they were really happy with everything they've done. The waterfront ambassadors helped with community outreach through the summer, specifically by being at the weekly farmers markets, playing with the kids that would come, but also helping community members fill out our community survey, talking about the project, talking about the different opportunities we had to engage with the waterfront this summer. And they also led their own youth walking tour to teach young people about the Piers Park III project. All together with programming and outreach, we've engaged with more than 4,000 people so far this year, and we still have a couple things to get done, so stay tuned for that. We also held our monthly Sabores de Nuestra Cultura family festivals in collaboration with the Piers Park Sailing Center and the Veronica Robas Cultural Center. Fantastic summer. We engaged with so many people enjoyed coming to the water, doing some free sailing, engaging arts and crafts. Specifically with all the heat waves, we know how exciting it is to be at Piers Park. During the festivals, community members were able to enjoy free sailing, dance performances, participate in yoga with the East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, and enjoy delicious food from local vendors like La Casa del Pan de Bono, Topacio, and Popsicles. Hundreds of people got out of the water during our free programming. We heard and saw that water access during these events was a major highlight for folks. And so that's always exciting to hear and talk about with the community. This year, we also tabled at various community events like the Boston Harbor Now Free Ferry Day and Eastie Pride Day to share about the Piers Park III project, our surveys, and programming happening throughout this year. We also participated in a peace circle centered around Piers Park III with Maverick Landing Community Services, where members shared their memories at Piers Park and ideas for the design and programming. We've engaged with 2,500 folks just at partner events this summer. So we're thankful to our partners for allowing us to have a space to share Piers Park III information. Our team also hosted Waterfront on Wheels in partnership with the Friends of the Mary Ellen Welch Greenway, a series of educational site tours that started at the Mary Ellen Welch Greenway, passed through Piers Park, and all the way to Constitution Beach. Special shout out to Counselor Gabriela Coletta, who joined us for our July tour during EC Week and helped share some information and history on the Greenway. It's always so much fun when we get to hear all the stories we've been told growing up here in EC. We also launched a co-urbanized site, which had a simplified and multilingual online engagement tool. It had information sharing and feedback gathering. The comment wall has received lots of feedback and generated some discussion among residents and visitors. This site is mobile and text compatible with interactive feedback, features, and a project timeline. So please check it out if you haven't, leave a comment. And then we have our QR code that you can feel free to scan or type in that website link. And as I mentioned before, we're not done with the year just yet. So stay tuned for information on upcoming events and programs. Like in December, we're going to host a Luminaria walk on the Mary L. Welch Greenway. We're going to sponsor an ice sculpture as part of the New Year's Eve waterfront ice sculpture stroll. Last year, we saw so many community members, and it was so much fun to see you all and close out the year. And we have plans in the works for another full slate of programs in 2023. And so we're going to get started with our first poll question of the night, which is, what was your favorite activity this year? If you participated, but if you didn't, it's okay. We just gave you a full list, so hopefully you'll be able to attend one of these next year.
Looks like we got some really great responses for both the Family Festival as well as free sailing. The free sailing was quite popular, and we really appreciate Piers Park Sailing Center and all of their work to help support that this summer. We have a few folks who also didn't participate, but they're looking forward to next year. I'm glad to see that you're willing to participate next year, because I didn't give you an option not to. So we expect all of you to come out and participate in some of the fabulous events that our engagement manager, Teresa Zapata Walker, put on this summer. She was not able to join us this evening. She just recently gave birth to a baby. So she's on leave right now, but hope to have her back soon. And then Gabriella, of course, did a lot of great work. So so yeah, it looks like both the Family Festival and the free sailing events were very popular. So we appreciate everyone's participation in that.
Yes, thank you for that. And if you didn't join this year, we hope to see you next year, at least at one of the events. And as always, we're looking for feedback, so feel free to share what your favorite events were and what you enjoyed. And with that, we're going to pass it over to Chris from Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates to walk us through the design update. So go ahead, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hey, everyone. As I've already been introduced, Chris from Michael Van Valkenburg Associates. We're the landscape architects. A few of my colleagues from MBVA are also on here. Laura and Priyanka. John is sometimes lurking in there as well. I've been a huge part of this process. It's really great to see you all back again, and welcome to those of you who are joining for the first time. We're looking forward to sharing an update on the design and progress for Piers Park 3, and especially looking forward to hearing more of your feedback. We've been really busy over the last several months, and a lot has developed since we saw you last. We're excited to share how your feedback and some of the additional analysis that we've been performing has helped to refine the concept for what we think will be a truly unique waterfront park in East Boston. Last time we spoke, we talked about Piers Park as being a complementary range of experiences between phases 1, 2, and 3. We see phases 1 and 2 as offering a mix of active and passive programming. And phase 3 was intended to provide more of the immersive side of landscape, the naturalized planting corridors, the coastal meadows, the low-lying salt marshes, and of course, access to the water. We've continued to receive really positive feedback to the idea of a landscape that offers something new to the East Boston waterfront, something that, especially the opportunities for direct and accessible engagement with the water. Because of the overwhelmingly positive feedback, we've actually sort of doubled down on that goal of providing more access and focused our energies on developing those programs and giving shape to the project. With this in mind, the park has become increasingly outward facing, fewer internal lawns and landscape rooms, more landscapes providing opportunities to safely dip your toes into Boston Harbor. I should also say that my 2-year-old has not quite recovered from her sugar rush on Monday, so you might hear her come and go. The landscapes that we heard most excitement about over the past several months, over this past couple of years, honestly, we've heard a lot of excitement about, and we've sort of grown and multiplied these kinds of landscapes across the site. The salt marsh has grown and become more accessible. We've met with the Piers Park Sailing Center to discuss how we can support a more inclusive and accessible kayaking program. And the informal beaches that we've discussed previously now sort of line the outer edges of the Phase 3 park, and they allow visitors to get right down to the water's edge at both high and low tide. In going through the exercise of prioritizing water access, we've also developed strategies to significantly reduce the environmental impact to the existing site. The last plan we looked at there on the left had a slightly larger footprint of occupiable park area, but it also required a significant amount of engineering to support the new landform. In these diagrams, the orange lines that you see represent the area of disturbance relative to the size of the proposed park. The updated design suggests a greatly reduced impact to the harbor and requires much less fill to establish. It's worth mentioning that less fill means a significantly less material trucked through East Boston neighborhoods throughout construction. In this cross section representing the same thing as those plans you just saw, you can see the relationship between the environmental impact and the accessible landscape in the previous design. The orange areas on either side represent a substantial engineering to support a new park, with material being excavated and replaced to build a new island. Throughout that process of going through schematic design, analysis has helped us to refine this cross section. And we're now looking at a park that shows a significantly more efficient relationship between the accessible landscape and the environmental impact. A new marine structure on the west side of the pier significantly reduces the amount of fill brought to and from the site to construct the park. In this section, the introduced fill that you see highlighted in yellow and structures highlighted in orange are used only to support programming that allows for a truly unique experience in East Boston. The salt marshes on the right, the outdoor classrooms on the left, with access to the harbor, flank the existing landmass on the site, as shown here in this section. A new beach at the outer edge of the park allows for gathering at and in the water. That's my daughter. The significant reduction to the environmental impact is largely made possible by our renewed focus on the existing conditions. We're actually out there today taking another look at this with the contractor, which was incredibly helpful. The current site, though in a state of disrepair, definitely has a story to tell about the East Boston waterfront. We're looking more closely at the pieces of the pier that might be reclaimed, the existing rail lines, the concrete apron that rings the outer perimeter of the pier, and the existing landmass there in the center that connects back to Phase 2. And they've all helped to shape the updated design that we'll look at. So this updated plan, as we've said, aims to increase accessibility and visibility of the harbor, especially the landscapes we're suggesting that will help to improve the habitat and water quality in and around the site. Though slightly smaller than the previous plan, it still has the capacity to host hundreds of people in the event of a busy summer Saturday, both in and adjacent to the water. This study suggests that the park could comfortably host almost 400. That's probably an unlikely number for a typical day, but it's good to know that it has the capacity in planning for events and programming of the park. The park is, of course, organized by a network of accessible pathways highlighted here in pink. The existing spit, that's sort of that landmass in the center, and the pier on the top of this image, or the west side of the site, act as the primary circulation routes, with several smaller paths winding through a series of immersive landscapes. A new kayak launch there at the bottom allows for an inclusive and accessible kayaking experience for all. In this image, representing a sort of eye-level view of the proposed park, the existing rail lines there, sort of orange on the bottom, drawing to the front of the image. Those are intended to draw visitors out to the end of the pier from Phase 2 Park. Watery landscapes on either side of the center spine provide access to the harbor. Salt-tolerant trees, shrubs, and grasses frame the walkways to provide shade and shelter from the winds of an exposed site. The west side of the center pathway, highlighted there in pink, is flanked by a series of salt marshes and tidal channels that become inundated during high tide. The tidal channels seen here, they're framed by stony edges of reclaimed granite, and they provide safe areas for school groups, summer camps, and children of East Boston to explore the kinds of landscapes that once occupied Boston Harbor. Migratory birds find refuge in the salt marsh, while mussels, crabs, and fish are found swimming through the calm waters of the tidal channel. Remnants of the former pier are also found throughout the marsh and the adjacent beaches. We've heard lots of feedback about this, excuse me, about specific events or kinds of events that would be great to celebrate at Phase 3 of Piers Park. While the lawns of Phases 1 and 2 are larger and might support the largest events, we also see the beach out at the end of Phase 3 as a place for communal gatherings, a place to continue plan to continue fine-tuning its design to support future event planning. On a typical day, we see the beach as an outward-facing landscape, a room that has accessible tidal pools and sweeping views of the Boston skyline beyond. We see it as a place for families to picnic right at the water's edge. But we also imagine it being an incredible place to host a couple hundred people for a movie night, a performance, or a community celebration. This study suggests capacity for more than 200 people gathered at the beach for a movie night. Finally, we see the new design as feeling significantly larger in some ways. It actually provides access to the harbor in ways that were not available in the previous scheme and currently are not available anywhere else in the park or really in the East Boston waterfront. We're excited about the way that this park engages a softer, more dynamic edge with its context. The east side of the park opens up to an enlarged kayak and sailing cove, allowing park goers to watch the activity of the existing sailing center. The outdoor classrooms nestled into that slope. The sloping beaches allow for educational programming and settling points adjacent to the restored habitat that we're looking to bolster in the harbor there. In general, we see the current design as actually being significantly more efficient and more engaging as a public landscape. And we're looking forward to hearing more from you on your thoughts and aspirations for the park and how we can continue to support the goals that you have. But before we jump directly into that discussion, we wanted to also share a few other updates on the project. First is that we've added a new member to our team. Until a few months ago, this project was really led by the Trustees of Reservations and shaped by a collective vision from the community. Thank you all for your help in supporting that. Massport's been a fantastic partner in allowing us to take on this ambition project and a challenging site. City, state, and federal agencies have provided support and steering us towards strategies to realize the vision. And then us, MBVA and our entire design team, our job has been to take all of this information and turn your aspirations into something tangible, a vision that we could all get behind and excited about and bring to the East Boston waterfront. We're excited to have added Turner Construction in a joint venture with J&J to the team for pre-construction services. They're helping to analyze cost and constructability, scheduling, and all the things that will eventually turn this vision into a park. They're doing a great deal of work in and around Boston Harbor currently, and they bring real practical knowledge to the team. And we're excited that they're adding this new sort of layer of realism to this project and helping deliver it. Turner is also helping to fine-tune our anticipated project schedule. We're currently getting back into detailed design and technical design studies for the next several months. And we expect to be back in front of you all again with an advanced design package after the new year. We're expecting about 18 months of construction with opening day in 2025. And we'll continue to update this again as we work with Turner to develop this schedule. Thanks again for joining us. And I'll pass it back to the trustees to start organizing some question and answers.
Great, thank you, Chris. Again, we're really excited about the progress and the development. We've spent a lot of time in conversations with a lot of folks in the community, so really interested to hear your thoughts. So please, as you are taking all of this in, let me flip the page so you can come back and look at this design, and put any questions that you might have in the chat. Amy's going to help us work through those. If you just want to ask a question out loud, we're more than well open to that as well. Just hit the raise hand function under reactions on your screen, and we'd be happy to do that. So let us know what you think. Amy, what do we have so far?
Yeah, so I see a first question from Jen wondering how wide the main pathway or the spit is, which I am thinking is a question for Chris.
Yeah, so that main pathway down the center is intended to be a really generous sort of promenade out to the end of the park. It's at least 20 feet wide to allow for emergency access if it's needed. But also we see it as being sort of a thoroughfare for people that will have furniture and places to sit and places to gather along the edges of it. So at least 20 feet wide, but planted so that it also feels immersive and embedded.
We also have a question from Mary about the enhanced habitat. If we can share a little more information about what's envisioned there. Yeah, it's sort of intentionally diagrammatic right now because we haven't yet gotten into the details of what that means. But part of the project and the goal, I think, for the trustees largely is that we want to make this a public and accessible waterfront for people, but in doing so it should also be helping to restore and provide habitat for migratory birds, for fish, and to help improve the quality of the water. And so part of the project is developing a landscape that is really just for strictly those things. It doesn't have people in it constantly. It's something that you can experience from a kayak, and from the land you can certainly see it. We also imagine there being some engineering of the harbor floor in and around the footprint of our site to increase and support increased biodiversity. Reef balls and oyster gabions are a starting point, but we're thinking we can do something significant and more immersive, so that can be something that's visible as well. We're certainly going to develop that through this detailed design and show you more of that in the next presentation.
Yeah, Chris, and I'll just add to that this also gives us a really great opportunity to be experimental and try something new here. And I'll say with Jen here that we've actually already had some conversations with the folks at the Stone Living Lab, which is part of Boston Harbor now, and some of the work that they're doing. We're really interested in partnering with a lot of the educational institutions and others who are doing really great resiliency work in this area to try something new and see what we can really develop as part of this site that is really interesting and enjoyable from an aesthetic perspective, but is also really functional and gives access to folks in a kayak or smaller vessel to get up close and take a look and see what's going on there. So that whole section is really kind of TBD, but we're really excited about the possibility and opportunity.
I see a question from Karen about any proposed bathroom facilities.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Karen. One that you and I have gone back and forth on quite a bit over the course of this project. So you'll recall when we put out the first conceptual design, almost probably 2 years ago now, we didn't have any sort of structures or facilities on the pier itself. Through a lot of feedback and community engagement, there was a lot of interest about that. And so in our most recent schematic design, the 50% schematic design that we released back in February, we had included a section that we were calling the Park House, which was a facility that was somewhere about the middle of the pier, that could serve a number of different functions, from hosting events to having restrooms to maybe potentially offering storage, so on and so forth. So that's an idea that we've explored rather thoroughly, I will say, over the last few months, and found that building an actual structure out on the pier comes with all sorts of issues. First and foremost, if you build the structure, you actually have to have the facilities available for a full-size Boston Fire Department fire truck to get out to it. And so that itself automatically puts some limitations in terms of the weight and the amount of space that it would take up. Additionally, it would require a heck of a lot of engineering, the types of, having to drive a bunch of new piles into the shoreline to support that type of a structure, which of course becomes very expensive, really cost prohibitive quite quickly. And so this particular design, as you'll see right here, obviously doesn't have a larger park house type facility on it. That said, we're still very much in the design phase and exploring what exactly this land could support. And while we don't have any bathrooms on here at the moment, it's definitely something that we're continuing to take a look at. I suspect if we are able to do something like that, it would probably be much closer to the phase 2 area and the sailing center on the terra firma, and something that is, really kind of closer to that area and accessible that way, so we don't have to worry about having a fire truck come all the way out. But that is something that we're still exploring. You heard Chris offer some estimates about space and crowds and how many people we can fit there. That's a key question when you're trying to figure out bathrooms, is how many people can go where. And now that we kind of have a shape to work with, that we can do those calculations, really the next step for us as part of the design development phase is to figure that out. Does that answer the question?
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Good to see you.
I see a question from Eric about fundraising and cost estimating and kind of where we're at with that.
Sure. No, that's a great question, Eric. Thanks for joining. So we have all along estimated this project is going to cost us between $20 and $40 million just to construct. I will say that after spending the summer with the folks at Turner Construction and others with a lot of detailed cost estimation on construction, it is very much on the high end of that, definitely within the $40 million range. And so probably it's going to end up closer to $44 or $45 million. And so part of this challenge, of course, is making sure that whatever it is that we're designing isn't negatively impactful from an environmental perspective, but also from a cost perspective. We have to make sure that we can come up with something that we can actually build. So that's a big piece of all this conversation. To date, we've raised just over $30 million for the project, which is just about 10 more than the last time we talked. So we're really excited about having wrapped up that $30 million phase of fundraising and really able to focus on that last 10 or 15 that needs to come together. We've since we last did one of these, received a number of actual gifts of public support from public officials that I really should call out and acknowledge and say thank you for. First of all, our congressional delegation led by Senator Markey and Senator Warren and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley were able to secure $2 million in congressionally directed spending as part of the FY22 appropriations bill, which is a really technical way of saying that we have some federal funding coming to support this site. Likewise, big note of thank you to Representative Mondro and Senator Edwards for their work. They've been actively engaged in supporting this project really from the jump. And their hard work is very close to paying off. I don't want to celebrate quite yet, but for those of you who follow the State House closely, the economic development bill that they had been working on for several months now word this evening is it's actually quite close to passage and may happen within the next 24 hours. And there's a big chunk of support for this project as part of that as well. And so that'll actually bump us up closer to probably the $32 million mark. So we still do have some work to do, but that's really going to be one of our primary focuses for the next year. And one of the key reasons why having this schematic design with all of your input and support is really important, because that's going to be, obviously the foundation for what we'll need to do to raise the money to get this thing built.
There's also a question from Joseph Bennett about the beach feature. He's curious about it and how the sand would be protected from high tides.
It's a great question. We're working closely with our geotechnical engineers and our marine engineers to make sure we're hitting the right elevations to get our, these kinds of exposed landscapes protected from high tides, from astronomical tides, and from storm surge. We're also looking closely at the materiality to make sure that whether it's sand or pebble or whatever it may be, still in very early stages of development from a materiality perspective, we're making sure that they are materials that will, be able to withstand inundation. The other thing I should say about that enhanced habitat area that currently is just a sort of green bubble on this diagram, is that actually is acting, or we intend that whatever that will be, it helps to reduce the wave energy from the sort of where the prevailing wave energies come from, that south corner of the site. So that'll help to reduce the amount of energy coming at the site at its most exposed point. So again, I think the specifics of materiality will be discussed at the next meeting a little bit more as we get further into that, but it's like the number one thing on our radar in terms of how to make sure this is not just great on day one, but for many, many years to come.
Thank you, Joseph.
Yeah, thank you. I see a comment from, I think, Ange, saying, I really like the design, the reuse of material, and that you took what residents had to say so seriously. As a 30-year resident, I look forward to enjoying this space. So not a question there, but just something, a nice piece of feedback, and we appreciate that. If there are more questions, please feel free to raise your hand and just, and speak with us or pop it in the chat. We do have some more time. And I see Jen.
Hey, I just wanted to say that this is a super cool design, and it makes me really excited to get to spend more time in East Boston. Like, I already love spending time in Eastie. But one random question, which I know you already talked about bathrooms in a park house, but even if there couldn't be a structure, is something like a water fountain and like having access to that something that could occur?
Yeah, I'll let Chris speak to more detail about that, but that's really what our whole next phase of design is all about. The detail piece of it is really kind of mapping out where things are going to be, the types of materials that we're using, the plantings, everything else. But yeah, no, I mean, this is really to take a look at and try and settle on what the shape is going to be, what the sort of physical structure is going to be, understanding what it's going to take from a marine engineering point of view to create this thing. But still a lot of detail left to fill in there. But Chris, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think that's right. We've also been talking about exactly those kinds of things. Thanks, Jen. The sort of basic services go beyond restrooms, and sometimes things like a bottle filling station are just like really critical aspects of making a beach or a place to come have a picnic appealing and sustainable for more than 45 minutes or so. So that is built into the concept and part of what's been included in the cost estimates that we've been running on these iterations of the design. So thank you. It's a good thing to keep reminding ourselves that these are important pieces of it.
I do see another question from Eric also asking if this smaller design is cheaper than the last design we showed.
substantially, and largely because, as you heard Chris talk about at the beginning, just the environmental impact of this design is much smaller. And when we say environmental impact, it sounds somewhat euphemistic. What we're actually talking about, and specifically talking about, is we were looking at needing to actually dredge out a good bit of the mucky material below the pier and to the sides of the pier to make that happen, which of course has negative consequences for a lot of the habitat. It has negative consequences for the people living in and around the area, as well as boats and everything else. And so that to us, and not to mention very expensive. And so that to us really was kind of a bit of a red flag as we got into the really detailed understanding of the marine engineering. And this is all stuff that happens below water that we'll never see ever again once it's done. And so, really interrogating the question of what are we trying to do here, and what are we trying to accomplish, and whether or not it would be worth it to try and push forward something that was twice what we were budgeted for, and also not to mention would face a pretty steep hill from a permitting perspective too. So these are all factors at play here that we're working with. But as you heard Chris talk about, we really have tried to focus on the unique elements of this park and providing access in a way that everyone in the community has time and again talked about from an interest perspective, but B is not readily available or even possible in a lot of other places, even in the city of Boston, that East Boston notwithstanding. And so that was really the opportunity and the focus there is making sure that we got the environmental impact under control, that we made a park that utilized a lot of the material that was already there, and really focused on delivering that world-class design that we've always wanted to, but didn't break the bank in doing so.
It's Karen. I have a question.
Go ahead, Karen. Yeah, what's up?
How is this proposed plan going to, this is a now and then in the future, sea rise, storms, there's, with flooding, we've had a history of that. How is that factored into the plan, and what type of plans have you to deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's critical to the plan. And actually, you know what? I'm going to let the architect talk about this, and then I'll fill in any details. But before I get out over my skis, Chris, why don't you talk a little bit about the materials and the approach about understanding the interaction with the water.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Karen. It's a great question, and something that we were talking about actually earlier this morning with the project team. And there's a couple things that go into it, right? It's deciding on what your design elevations are and what they are, what those elevations mean, right? We have a pretty good sense of the elevation that of like current storm surge, and we also have a pretty good sense of where those elevations are going to be. Those flood elevations will be 30, 50, even years beyond that. And we're looking at whether it's FEMA or the standards that are set in the most recent BPDA guidelines for flood elevations, and what those mean for a park, because often those elevations refer to the guidelines for a building, right? And the really critical thing about parks and resilience is that it's not just a matter of setting them up above that highest elevation. We certainly could do that. It would make it tough to access from the phase 2 site, which is more in line with the lower elevation. But really the key component of making a resilient park is that it can withstand those occasional floods 30, 50 years from now, and that when the waters recede, there's still a park there, and that's a product of the materials and the engineering that go into making those stable. So we've been talking a lot about these sort of stony riprap edges, the stone amphitheaters that are made of reclaimed granite and things that are, of course, places that are comfortable to sit and look out over the harbor, but they're also very heavily engineered to make sure that they can withstand that wave action, that they can take the occasional coastal flooding from and storm surge from, you know, that 500-year storm. So that too is part of, you know, the step 1, step 2 of what we're doing in DD is like really nailing down what our design parameters will be, understanding what, you know, what we want this park to do and how we want it to perform after a storm. There's certainly times that we anticipate the park will be inundated by, you know, that 500-year storm several years from now, but we expect that once those waters recede, there will still be the, you know, Piers Park III standing there, and that's what we're looking for in a resilient coastal landscape.
I'm
Thank
glad
you.
I'll let Chris answer that question. Good job, Chris.
I see another question about the tidal pool and the tidal channel and whether you can share or just, you know, say more or share more about what's planned there.
Sure. So the tidal pool out on the beach, I think they're similar in depth in terms of, you know, the water depth and how they operate. We anticipate that at high tide they may become, you know, sort of underwater and connected directly to Boston Harbor. But when the tide comes down and the tide recedes, we still have a body of water there, a body of water that's safe to occupy for, you know, children and caregivers to look for those little crabs, to find little fish swimming around in the tidal pool, or even just to wade in the pool safely so that they're not, you know, in a body of water that's directly connected to the, you know, an active shipping channel. The tidal channel is a little bit different. It's similar in that it's connected to the harbor and it's inundated with the tidal cycle. But its role is to drain the salt marshes. The salt marshes are, you know, a local native sort of ecotype. You see them all across the New England landscape. And at high tides, they're you know, significantly underwater. At low tide, there's sort of these grassy meadows that emerge right at the water's edge. They like to be inundated, but they also like to drain and not be sitting in, you know, standing water. So the tidal channel is part of letting that water flush out. But there too, it's a place that's occupiable. It's safe for children to be in, you know, 12, 18 inches of water, looking for crabs and looking for mussels and shells and things like that we imagine will find their way into these tidal channels as they become active and thriving habitats right there in the phase 3 site.
I'm actually just seeing one more comment for now anyway, that's from Mary Cole. She says it's a beautiful design, accessible and a little wild at the same time. That's what you're going for, right, Chris?
A little wild is what I'm always going for. So love to hear that. Thank you.
I think we did have a few things we wanted to share before we wrapped up. Does that sound right? Not to rush anyone out, but maybe we can hop to that for now, Nick.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask Gabriella to come back and talk about our next steps with our open houses next week, as well as our Spanish language event that we're about to do here in just a little bit. Gabriella, where you at?
Yeah, so thank you all for joining us tonight. As we said, we do have this exact same meeting being led in Spanish at 7:15. So you don't need to go again, but if you do know of a neighbor that would prefer to listen to it completely in Spanish, please share the information with them. And then next week, we are hosting open houses for the Piers Park III project on Thursday, November 10th from 6 to 7:30. We're going to be at the East Boston Public Library. We're going to have some ambassadors, so if you missed them, they're going to make a return. Feel free to come say hi to them. We're also going to be there on Saturday, November 12th from 11 to 12:30 p.m. at the library as well. If you can't attend the Thursday one, you should definitely attend the Saturday one. They're the same material, so you shouldn't feel like that you should attend both. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and take a look on our website. And then one of our last in-person events is happening December 10th, the Luminaria Walk. Last year it was a hit, and we are expecting the same thing this year. So be on the lookout for our flyer, but you can definitely go to our website at onewaterfront.org/events to keep up to date once we have those events coming up. And we hope to see you at one, if not all, of our upcoming events.
Thank you, Gabriella. Yeah, on behalf of the whole team, really appreciate everyone's time tonight. All of this work happens only through your dedicated time and feedback. So can't thank you enough for taking that time and giving it to us this evening. So we look forward to seeing you soon. Hopefully we'll catch you at one of our open houses or at the Luminaria Walk. In the meantime, as always, go to onewaterfront.org. To learn about the events that we've got going on, updates about the park. You can get a link to the Co-Urbanize site there to give us direct feedback, see the timeline for the project, and just engage with us because we love to hear from you all. So again, thank you so much for your time this evening, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.